Auspicious greetings. Today is session 4 of our course, and we will be answering the questions relating to understanding the human condition. Today, we are going to ask the "Who am I?" question. The Buddha's intention in teaching the Dharma is to offer us insight into the human condition with the hopes of empowering us with the wisdom to address the fundamental causes of that which prevents us from living a happy and peaceful life. Once we can understand the underlying maladies of human existence, we are empowered to respond with an action plan consisting of bodily, verbal, and mental processes that work towards the development of ethics, mental clarity, and wisdom, the three factors that cuts to the core of existential issues and offers true and sustained happiness and peace in life and beyond. In addressing the human condition, it is essential that we bring our minds to the realities of our existence in this world, something that we frequently forget to do as we get caught up in our hectic schedules required of us by the 21st century. For today's session, we will be looking deeply into ourselves and addressing the 5 factors of experience, which together makes up our sense of I and our experience of the world. We will be also addressing the issues pertinent to the 21st century that affects the way in which we experience things in relation to this notion of I. For this, I invite everyone to relax and slowly bring your careful attention to your lives. Have you ever felt bombarded by the daily routine and that a day goes by without feeling that anything important has been accomplished? And that this whole day has gone by so quickly before we know it? Maybe we're missing out on something. Have you ever felt that seeking sensual pleasures results in more desire of such pleasures, and that we are never satisfied with what we have? If so, this is a hint on how we should understand the human condition. Have you ever tried justifying your anger, and that when you feel that anger is subsiding, you intentionally remind yourself to remain angry, since it is your right to be angry? This is not simply just holding a grudge. It is the vicious cycle of mental processes that reinforce our anger. The thing about the human condition is, unless we make this effort to understand it, we won't. The more we don't understand it, the more we fail to realize the fluid nature of it, and the more life is not as peaceful and as happy as it should be. And in this very fast-paced, information-filled world we call home, our minds are constantly led by the nose by our sensorium, and we never have the chance to live our lives, however paradoxical that may seem. By understanding the behind-the-scene workings of the human condition and being mindful of it, we are afforded the opportunity to turn off autopilot, make the right decisions in life, and be happy. And all this happens only when we stop grasping onto this self or notion of I. Let us first look at what the human condition entails, and then we slowly get into the details of how we can change our understanding of experience. Of the psychophysical being, form makes up the physical aspect. Sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness makes up the psychological aspect. Form entails the human body as well as external material form. It refers to anything that obstructs, that is, anything that occupies space, or can hinder, or can be divided into parts. They are the first 5 faculties of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and the 5 corresponding objects of sensorium, so sights, sounds, odor, tastes, and tactile sensations. Simply put, everything you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel is considered form. Sensation refers to primitive sensory function, which senses an object as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. As our eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and body come into contact with the outside world, the 5 corresponding objects of sight, sound, odor, taste, and tactile sensations appear. These corresponding objects are associated by the second factor of experience as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations. The same is true for the mind faculty and the corresponding object of thought. Feelings of hunger, physical pain, heat, and cold are examples of sensations that are perceived as unpleasant, while breathing is normally associated as a neutral sensation. The sensation of being satiated or hydrated is usually associated with pleasant sensations. Likewise, the thought of physical comfort is pleasant. This factor of experience, that is sensation, does not produce either wholesome or unwholesome karma. They are just natural responses of the human condition based on survival instincts, bodily needs, and human ecology. So it's the most primitive needs of human beings. Perception is a very busy factor of experience, yet it is passive. Most of what we call making sense of the world fits into this category. It automatically provides abstract ideas of what things are through language, knowledge, and so forth, and through the functions of registering, recognizing, and associating our experiences. When we see, hear, smell, or taste or touch something, we always flip through our mental index cards to find the category we can associate with this new object of sensorium. For example, when we see a doctor, we associate him or her with our previously constructed knowledge of what a doctor entails, together with our experiences of interaction with them. Likewise, if we have ever touched a hot stove in the past, we will recognize that touching a hot stove results in the sensation of pain, and so we associate the touching of a hot stove and pain, and will establish the knowledge that hot stoves should not be touched. In a similar way, all types of learned theories are the product of this factor. Wholesome and correct perceptions and understandings of life inspire wholesome actions and reactions, while unwholesome perceptions and understandings inspire unwholesome actions and reactions. For example, if we learn that helping others is a good thing to do, and we act upon this understanding, then good results will follow. However, if we learn to be racist, then evil results are inevitable. No one is born a racist or sexist for this matter. These mindsets are learnt from society. As such, it is important to establish correct knowledge and associations as future experiences and decisions are shaped by them. Therefore, right views are imperative. If we develop wrong views, all subsequent recognition and synthesis of new experiences become distorted. In and of itself, this factor of perception is largely not problematic. It works reactively to make sense of the world. Though if our perception is erroneous, it leads to a cycle of erroneous reactions that perpetuates delusion. And this said, it is the working of the next factor of experience that actually creates wholesome or unwholesome karma. Volitions can be understood as active mental actions or formations that are driving forces. These include all types of active emotions, mental habits, opinions, intentions, and plans and decisions triggered by an object of experience. When we refer to wholesome and unwholesome states of mind, we are actually referring to this factor of experience, volition. As for unwholesome emotions, whenever we experience something pleasant, we may have an underlying tendency towards desire and craving. When we have an unpleasant sensation, we have an underlying tendency towards aversion and hostility. In simple terms, volition conditions our likes and dislikes. These latent tendencies manifest when volition relates experiences to our sense of I. Volition justifies that I deserve pleasant sensations and I should be free of unpleasant sensations. However, when we lose access to pleasant sensations, we feel that I am at a loss. Whenever we are in the presence of things that cause unpleasant sensations, this sense of I feels violated. Either way, these afflictive states of mind cause dissatisfaction. We also attribute this sense of I to objects. For example, we may say, "This is my book, my pen," where previously perception recognizes that a long, thin object that contains ink is called a pen. Volition claims ownership of it. We also take ownership of opinions. That is my opinion. So that whenever we lose things that belongs to us, or when someone has opposing opinions, we feel threatened and we feel that this I is at a loss, and we start justifying our position with actions. For example, when we find out that our friends have different political views, we may soon find ourselves unfriending them on Facebook and crossing them off our Christmas card list. On a larger scale, groups of people develop hatred for one another due to opposing interests and opinions. This is the real reason behind racism, inequality, conflict, and war. And this is very much at home in our current situation with the war in Ukraine. In terms of mental habituations, latent karma contained in volition inspires us to either repeatedly seek the things we crave and despise unpleasantries. For example, when we eat chocolate for the first time, the second aggregate passively detects a pleasant sensation, while our perception helps to make sense of the experience, recognizing that chocolate is a food that tastes sweet, is brown in color, and is of a particular aroma. It is volition that creates that sense of craving for that pleasant sensation, justifying ownership of it. This in turn conditions the mental habit of craving for chocolate every time we think about it or when we come in contact with it. It almost becomes automatic if we do not intervene. When we physically act out and eat the chocolate while inspired by craving, we are allowing volition to entertain itself, reinforcing the associated latent karma of greed that accumulates over many lifetimes. The same is true with our interpersonal relationships. Those we develop resentment for are labeled as enemies, whom, when every time they appear in our thoughts or in person, causes us to habitually despise them. More so, whenever there is that sense of I, then there will be the notion of you and them. Whatever is related to I becomes of primary importance, while things related to you and them become less important. The same is true with our opinions in relation to the opinions of others, and this is how volition inspires self-centeredness. In short, unwholesome volition includes craving, aversion, jealousy, pride, and attaching to the notion of I. That results inevitably in dissatisfaction. And wholesome volition, on the other hand, includes good intentions, well-wishing, acts of compassion, selflessness, and generosity, and they result in reinforcing wholesome latent karma required for the practice of morality, meditation, and wisdom. Unwholesome volition, in the sense of the Middle French word emotion, or mover, is precisely what Buddhist practice addresses. It is trying to calm that which unwholesomely moves the mind. Consciousness is the bare act of awareness without the overlay of sensation, perception, and volition, and takes place only when the six faculties come in contact with the six corresponding objects. When we see, the bare act of seeing is visual consciousness. When we hear, the bare act of hearing is auditory consciousness. The same is true for smell, taste, touch, and mental processes. In a sense, consciousness is a reaction that has one of the six faculties as its basis and one of the six corresponding phenomena as its object. At the same time, consciousness underlies all other factors of experience, since without consciousness, the six faculties cannot function, and thus sensation, perception, and volition do not come into play. As Buddhist practitioners, we slowly work towards seeing that our factors of experience are continually working, and that this consciousness is actually infinite individual acts of consciousness, one after another, as we come into contact with this phenomenal world. This means that with each arising of consciousness, we are reborn, and as such, we have unlimited potential to transform ourselves for the better. The main issue is our volitions create this sense of I, and it becomes attached to forms, it becomes attached to sensations, to perceptions, it becomes attached to itself, to all the opinions, to all that which is related to emotions, and it is attached to consciousness. Anything that accords with this sense of I is favored and sought after. Anything that goes against this sense of I causes aversion. Again, I invite you to take a step back and think of all the ways we have been fooled by our lack of understanding of experiences. Have you ever been fooled by your perception? Once there was an experiment conducted by a researcher, and this researcher was trying to understand how humans perceive. So what he did, he took 2 pieces of cake and found himself on a busy street, inviting people to come to his stall and taste different types of cake, one labeled $15 and one labeled $55. So the experiment invited people to take one spoonful of the $15 cake and compare the quality of the cake to a $55 cake. So throughout the experiment, many of the people who engaged in this experiment were led by the nose to understand that that $15 cake was dry. It was not as rich in flavor. It was not as tasty as the $55 cake. So upon understanding that one cake was $15 and one cake was $55, without allowing ourselves to truly taste the cake, people were jumping to conclusions that a $55 cake was more tasty. But the catch here is both pieces of cake are exactly the same. They are part of the same cake. So from here we see that human beings have this habit of being lazy. We try to perceive things before we truly do. And we try to understand the world before we truly do. And we jump to conclusions about things, about people, and so forth. And this causes us many problems down the track. Now, have you ever felt that it is difficult to make rational decisions when we are emotional? Research shows that instant gratification, or the seeking of instant gratification, wanting sensual pleasure, wanting that feeling of happiness straight away, actually acts on the development of our prefrontal cortex, which regulates all different types of executive functions as well as regulates our emotions. So whenever we are in a situation where we cannot wait for things and want things immediately, okay, we buy things on Amazon, we expect it to be delivered within 48 hours, 24 hours. And when it doesn't, we start getting agitated and irritated. Whenever we want to eat something and it's not there, we start getting vexed and we start making plans to act out and go to the shop and buy what we want to eat. And what happens is when we get into this habit of gratifying ourselves instantly, we are losing out on the virtue of patience. And because of this, our emotions or the ability to regulate emotions is drastically undermined. And we soon feel that it's easier for us to become emotional. And then with emotional, it is a vicious cycle because we cannot make rational decisions. So in life, just like this, we become servants to this whole understanding of instant gratification. The next question I'd like to ask is, do you feel that it is difficult to kick habits? The reason why it is difficult to kick habits or form good ones is because just like the whole idea of instant gratification, as soon as we encounter something which seems pleasurable to the senses, then we try to make the most of it and entertain that sensation. And whenever we satiate that sensation, albeit temporarily, we feel that, yes, I've achieved. I have ate that packet of chips and so forth. And then every time we think of food or every time we smell that particular food, it becomes a habit to want to seek it. And then when we relate our sensations or seeking of sensations with particular situations like, oh, I'm going to the movies, I have a habit of eating popcorn, then every time I go to the movies, I must have popcorn, and it becomes a habit. And the same is true for everything we do in life. Habits form because of our seeking of sensual pleasure and satiation of this pleasure. But the thing is, the more we try to seek it, the more it is left unsatiated and the more we try to look for it. So this becomes habitual. The same is true for anger. If we give rise to anger for someone, or when we have resentment for someone, it feeds itself into a vicious cycle and it's very hard to break. But then with good habits, it's interesting because good habits usually do not provide instant gratification. It does not provide that sugar boost or sugar shot that sometimes we look for. And because it doesn't come straight away, we lose on the motivation to seek it out. And because of that, good habits are very hard to break. And this habit is none other than the workings of volition. It feeds itself and it feeds itself again in a cycle which brings perpetual seeking and dissatisfaction in our lives. This brings us to the next question. Do you feel that it is difficult to break routine? Do you feel that it is difficult to experience new things? Well, from a Buddhist point of view, this is probably because of the fear of the unknown. And again, if we examine this clearly, why are we afraid? Well, most times, this fear has to do with our protection of this sense of I, or in other words, protection of this ego. Anything that this ego feels it loses control over, it gets scared. So because of this, we tend to want to fit into a routine or settle ourselves into a routine and not leave it due to the fear of the unknown. So very quickly, subconsciously, and also the workings of volition, we are pushed to do that which is in accordance with this ego or sense of I. And then it becomes mechanical and automatic to the point where we're not actively using our minds in everything we do in life. So what happens? Several things happen. As soon as we put ourselves on autopilot, it almost feels as though life is just going on its course without our intervention. And we soon realize that life becomes a little bit out of touch. Things become impassionate. Things become not so much us, but the kind of routine of life. And then, of course, we feel dissatisfied. And when we feel dissatisfied, we do not know how to bring back that sense of presence, that sense of living life. And then to break this cycle, it takes a lot of effort. It takes us applying the mind into everything we do without prejudice, without the workings of this volition, to be able to appreciate every single moment of life. Well, let's take a look at our next situation. We know that in this day and age especially, it's all about disposable consumerism. Everything is disposable. Our lunch boxes, our drink canisters, everything we do, everything we have is disposable. Cars are made more disposable than they used to be. Houses are not as durable as they used to be. And even things like packaged items, everything is disposable. And because everything is disposable, we get in this mindset that we can dispose of those things we don't like. So we only have to look at the landfill. All those items of clothing which are near new, all those items of electrical appliances which are near new but probably not liked by the user, is disposed. So we have this understanding that we don't like things, we dispose of it. Okay, just like the classes we attend, we don't like that class, we dispose it. Okay, and this disposable mindset is actually carried out into many things in life. Okay, let's say friendships. When we are friends with others, when we feel that we have a common sense of benefit from this friendship, we continue it. But the moment we feel that, hey, this friendship is not doing me any good, this marriage is not doing me any good, what do? We dispose it. And this applies to many things in life. We dispose things we don't like, but we don't take it head on. We don't deal with our challenges, we dispose of them. But the problem is, they're never really disposed. They come back at us. So from the above, we see that there are many instances in life where we do not understand the human condition. And when we fail to understand the mechanisms of experience, we become attached to them. We are timely reminded by the famous Buddhist analogy of what the 5 factors of experience really are. Material form is like a lump of foam, and feeling or sensation is like a bubble. Perception is like a mirage, and the constructing activities of volition are just like the banana tree lacking a core. Consciousness is like a magician's illusion. So, just to revisit our understanding of the 5 factors of experience, material form is like a lump of foam, meaning that our physical being and all the physical phenomena around the world, they come and go. So just like foam forming in the river when the current hits against river rocks, it is dispersed as soon as a stronger current comes and rushes it away. And then sensations are like bubbles. They're very impermanent. The bubble blows, and that's the end of our sensations. And perception is like a mirage, whereby, because as we mentioned, we don't take the time to perceive things slowly and carefully and thoroughly. So we are always led by this sense of urgency to want to perceive things quickly and make sense of the world. So everything we see sometimes is just a mirage. Yeah? And the constructing activities of the mind, volition, lack an intrinsic core. What this means is our emotions are actually empty because they change all the time. Our opinions are empty because with every living moment, our opinions change, albeit so subtly, without our understanding or awareness of it. And of course, this notion of I also undergoes change constantly, so it's empty. And consciousness is like a magician's illusion. So just as we mentioned before, consciousness are individual yet continual arising of instances of awareness. And this coming and going of consciousness is repeated continually and without intermission. So this makes us feel, it fools us into feeling that consciousness is linear and continuous, but it is actually individual instances of arising and ceasing. And just like that, it is the magician who tricks us into believing that consciousness is what we see, a continuous stream of existence. The attachments to forms, sensations, perceptions, volitions, and consciousness makes one servant to one's senses. It makes one servant to one's perceptions, and servant to one's emotions, opinions, and intentions, and servant to one's misunderstanding of consciousness. We fail to realize that at every passing moment of our lives, we are reborn over and over again, every split second. And then with this each rebirth, we have unlimited potential as to how we make the most of our experiences. If we can understand that all factors of experience are transitory, we are inspired to use our volitions to create good mental habits, to give rise to wholesome emotions, and to do away with the dissatisfying sense of ego and become unshackled from its vices, and to become perfectly selfless and happy and peaceful. I hope this session has provided you with insights as to how to understand our experiences, and I sincerely wish that such insight brings happiness and peace to you. In the meantime, Take care, stay safe, and see you next week. Auspicious blessings.